I still smell the morning, fresh-cut pine, diesel, the bite of cold steel in my hands, when I step onto the scaffold that last time. Asheville wakes slow like an old hound lifting its head. Church bells from St. Mary's drift across the site, soft as a lullaby. I check the planks because that's what I do. What I've always done, count the bolts, test the boards, nod to Peter Lawson as he cups his coffee and says, "You're too careful, Sam." I grin and say, "That's why we go home at night." The air is damp, Blue Ridge mist crawling down the hill, leaving everything slick. My knees ache the way they do at 50-something, but it's a good ache earned. I think about Evelyn's cinnamon rolls cooling on the counter, the kind she makes when she's soft with me, when she remembers we used to dance barefoot in the kitchen at midnight. I lift the nail gun. The sky glows milk white. A gull cries, or maybe it's a hawk, and then that sound. Not thunder. A shiver, a split, like ribs cracking under a heavy boot. "Hold!" I shout, voice torn by the wind. Peter's face drains. The plank beneath my left boot sighs, dips, answers with a low groan I feel in my teeth. "Don't move!" he yells. I freeze, gripping the frame so hard my palms sting. Somewhere below, a radio plays Merle Haggard, too bright, too happy. The world shrinks to the hiss of my breath and the tick-tick-tick of something loosening where I can't see. I think of Lucas, lanky and quiet at 16, and Becky, headstrong, waging little wars over curfews and eyeliner. I think of Evelyn's smile across the dinner table, the way she squeezes my hand when no one's looking. I think of all of that as the scaffold shudders again, once, twice, and Peter screams my name. The frame snaps like a wishbone. Weight drops out from under me. I'm falling, and in that sliver of sky before the ground rushes up, a voice inside says, "Very calm, don't look up, Samuel." I look up anyway, and see exactly who let go. Impact is not a sound so much as a flash, a white room with the lights turned off. When the world returns, it comes back mean. Hot copper in my mouth, gravel biting my cheek. A scream sawn off mid-note that I don't recognize as my own. "Sam, don't move!" Peter's kneeling above me, eyes too wide, hands shaking. I try to breathe and my ribs argue, each breath a rusted hinge. The sky is a tall, empty thing. I taste dirt. I taste fear. People swarm. Boots thud, belts jingle, someone mutters a prayer. And under it all, the same song floats up from the radio, cheerful as if I hadn't left the scaffold like a broken sparrow. Evelyn's face swims in. No, a memory. Sunday mornings, her hair damp from the shower, steam still curling off her skin. "You'll work yourself into the grave, Samuel," she'd say, swatting my shoulder with a dish towel, flirty, half mocking. "And who'll fix the porch swing then?" I'd kiss her palm and say, "Guess I'd better stay alive." When the EMTs arrive, I cling to that voice, that kitchen sunlight. A woman, Nurse Martha Fields, I'll learn later, leans close, smells like peppermint and laundry soap. "Stay with me, sir," she says, eyes steady. "Tell me your name." I croak it. She nods. "Good, you're here. You're with me." They strap my neck, fit me into a hard plastic cradle that doesn't love the shape of my body. Peter bends, touches my elbow. "I checked it, Sam, I swear I did." I want to reassure him, to say I know to call him brother, but my throat is a fist. The siren starts, and the world stutters past the ambulance windows. Oak trees, the billboard with the smiling realtor. The diner where Evelyn and I split pecan pie like teenagers on payday. I close my eyes against the flashing lights and see the moment before I fell. The swivel of a wrench. A hand letting go. Not an accident's blind chaos, but a choice as neat as a signature. Whose hand? Whose cool, steady grip? The siren wails louder. The answer presses against the back of my teeth. And then the doors burst open at the ER, and the first face I see makes me swallow it back down. Hospitals smell like bleach and secrets. They roll me beneath lights too bright for mercy, slide me from gurney to table with practiced gentleness, like they're moving a wedding cake. A doctor's voice, brisk, a woman's, calls out numbers that become my new name. They cut my shirt, exposing a chest map of scars and sawdust. "We'll control the pain," Nurse Martha says, and for a second the world loosens. In the burning silence of morphine, memories wander in. Evelyn's kiss at our wedding, rain tapping tin roofs, the rasp of my father's flannel when he hugged me after I bought our first house. Home, always. Home Evelyn arrives like thunder, heels clicking, hair neat, lipstick precise as if grief should be photogenic. "Oh my God, Sam!" she cries loud enough for waiting rooms and echoes. She grips my hand with fingers that tremble just enough. "Don't you leave me," she whispers. "Don't you dare." I try to squeeze back to be the man she expects, but my bones feel like wet ash. Lucas and Becky hover in the doorway. Lucas with his baseball cap crushed in his fist, Becky pretending she isn't crying. "Dad," Lucas says, voice cracking on the vowel. "Dad, you'll be fine." I nod for him because fathers nod even when they're not sure. Later, after x-rays, after words like fracture that sound final even when they aren't, the room empties. Fluorescents hum. Evelyn sits in the visitor chair, ankles crossed, eyes flicking toward her phone like a moth to a porch light. "We should talk about money," she says softly, as if she's offering me soup. "The company. They'll owe you. And we have to be smart." I stare at her. The image of that hand loosening the wrench skates across my vision, cool and tidy. She feels my gaze and smiles, calm as a lake. "I'll handle things for you. You just get better." She squeezes my fingers. "I swear I love you." I want to tell her the truth raging in my ribs, that love feels like a plank you can step on without listening for the groan. That I saw something on that scaffold, saw someone. The door opens. Harold Hal Price pokes in, all cologne and easy grin. "Heard there was trouble," he says. Evelyn stands, already moving toward him. "Just in time," she says. "We've got a lot to plan." My heart goes quiet as a held breath. And right then, through the ache and the drugs, I realized the fall was only the start. The first weeks after the accident blurred together, a fog of painkillers, beeping monitors, and the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes. When they finally sent me home, Evelyn had already transformed our living room into a recovery ward. The recliner faced the window, the air smelled like lemon cleaner and chicken broth, and the TV murmured the afternoon news on low volume. "You'll rest, Samuel," she said, setting a tray beside me. Soup steaming, toast buttered edge to edge, a napkin folded crisp as hospital linen. Her voice was gentle, rehearsed, maybe too calm. I was too grateful to notice the edges. I tried to tell her about the sound I'd heard before the scaffold fell, that sharp twist of metal, the hand that moved. But every time I began, she'd hush me with a spoon of soup or a cool palm on my forehead. "Don't think about it now," she'd whisper. "You'll drive yourself crazy." Her perfume lingered longer than her touch, and when she left the room, I caught fragments of hushed phone calls drifting down the hallway. "Yes, no, he won't ask yet," she said once before hanging up quick when she saw me watching. The days were slow. Lucas came by after school to mow the lawn, quiet and dutiful. Becky hovered with teenage impatience, torn between sympathy and the need to escape the heavy air of sickness. I was grateful for their help, but felt the distance growing like a shadow between us. Evelyn managed everything. The bills, the doctor visits, even the mail. "You just heal," she'd repeat like prayer beads. "Let me take care of the rest." At night, when she thought I was asleep, I'd hear her pacing in the kitchen, the clink of glass, the rustle of papers. The rhythm was always the same, pour, read, whisper, sigh. One night I called out, "Everything okay, Ev?" She froze mid-step, then smiled that smile too fast to be real. "Just checking the bank statements, love," she said. "We're fine." But when I looked at her eyes, the way they darted from mine to the floor, I knew something else was moving in the dark. And still, when she tucked the blanket around me, I let myself believe her. The first time she brought the envelope, she did it with the tenderness of a nurse changing a bandage. "It's nothing big, Sam," she said, sliding it onto my tray beside the soup bowl. "Just some forms for the insurance company. Janet Monroe said it's better to sign early, to keep your benefits." I was drowsy from pain meds, my right arm trembling as I reached for the pen. Evelyn steadied my hand, her thumb brushing my knuckles, an old familiar comfort that felt like home. "See," she said softly, "we're a team." I signed once, twice, maybe 3 times. I remember the sound of the pen on paper more clearly than her voice. Later I'd recall that she flipped the top sheet over too quickly, as if hiding something. "You'll get your settlement soon," she said. "They're saying it could be life-changing money." Her tone carried awe and fear in equal measure. I smiled weakly. "Guess we'll finally fix the roof," I joked. "Maybe take that trip to Charleston you always talk about." She kissed my forehead and said, "Maybe." Days turned to weeks. Evelyn became my gatekeeper. No visitors without her permission. No mail unless she read it first. Janet Monroe stopped by once. a brisk woman with kind eyes and a habit of taking notes even while she spoke. "We'll file everything soon," she told me, glancing briefly toward Evelyn. "But I'll need your signature again when the final settlement arrives." "In person, not through anyone else." Evelyn's smile froze at the edges. "Of course," she said sweetly. "He'll be ready." After Janet left, Evelyn stood by the window, arms crossed tight. "You shouldn't let her fill your head with details," she said. "It just stresses you out." I didn't argue. My body was still a battlefield of bruises and stitches, but something about her tone made my stomach turn cold. That night I dreamed I was falling again, but slower this time. Evelyn stood at the top of the scaffold, holding a pen instead of a wrench. I woke to find her hand resting on my chest, her wedding ring glinting under the lamp. "You're safe," she whispered. "Everything's handled." But in the half-light, her smile looked like victory. By the time winter settled over Asheville, I could limp across the porch without the crutch. The cold bit deep into my scars, and Evelyn wrapped me in scarves like a mother dressing a child. "You're too proud," she'd say when I insisted on walking to the mailbox. "You'll tear something open." I'd laugh it off, grateful for her care, but uneasy with how she watched me, not with affection, but calculation. Like she was waiting for something. The settlement finally came through in January, $740,000, a number I could hardly imagine. Janet called to congratulate me personally. "Make sure the check's in both names," she said, firm and clear. "Don't let anyone deposit it without you there." I thanked her, promised I'd handle it. When I hung up, Evelyn was standing in the doorway, her face unreadable. "Who was that?" she asked. "Janet," I said. "She says we need to go together to the bank." Evelyn smiled slowly. "We will," she said. "Tomorrow." But tomorrow came with another envelope, this one stamped urgent. "They need one last signature," she said. "It's to release the funds. You're too sore to go out in this weather. I'll take care of it after." Her voice was honey. Her hand rested lightly on my shoulder. I hesitated, the pen trembling in my hand. "You sure?" I asked. She leaned down, lips near my ear. "Trust me, Sam, always trust me." I signed again. When she left, the house felt too quiet. The clock ticked like a heartbeat I couldn't match. Snow began to fall outside, soft and relentless. Through the window I saw her car pull away, tires crunching over the driveway. The taillights glowed red for a moment, then vanished into the dark. That night I dreamed again, not of falling this time, but of a house. I knew one, half built on a hill I didn't recognize. Evelyn stood at the porch, smiling. Behind her, lights glowed in every window, and I could hear someone laughing inside. A man's laugh, low and easy. When I woke, the bed beside me was cold, and for the first time since the fall, I wondered if maybe my body wasn't the only thing that had been broken that day. The day we went to the bank, the air had that tight winter bite that makes your breath look guilty. Evelyn drove with both hands at 10 and 2, eyes forward, face set like she was attending a funeral for someone she didn't care for. I kept the check folded in my jacket pocket, a rectangle of promise pressing against my ribs. "We'll set up a joint account, right?" I asked, already knowing her answer and needing to hear it anyway. "Of course," she said, smiling without warmth. "We're a team, remember?" Inside the bank, the heat smelled like carpet and copier toner. A young teller named Amy Granger greeted us with a canned glow. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Dalton," she said, touching the check as if it might bite. Evelyn handled the paperwork, brisk and sure, as if she'd rehearsed the lines. "We'll need a cashier's check, and then we'll open a high-yield account," she told Amy, pausing only to let her wedding ring catch the light. I nodded like a man in a parade he didn't sign up for. While Amy typed, I noticed the way Evelyn stood, slightly angled, shielding the forms with her body. Harold Hal Price slipped in 5 minutes later, a gust of cologne and confidence, the kind of man who called everyone buddy and meant pawn. "Just in the neighborhood," he said, patting my shoulder. "Thought you might want some advice on investments." I wanted to ask how the neighborhood happened to be my bank, but the words stuck. Amy slid the documents across to me. "Here and here," she said, tapping the lines. My hands shook and Evelyn steadied them, her touch soft, her gaze hard. I signed. The pen moved like it belonged to someone else. Amy took the check to the back. Evelyn's phone buzzed. She turned it face down. Hal leaned in. "You'll thank us later," he murmured, as if I were a stubborn child. When Amy returned, she had 2 envelopes. One she handed to me, a temporary card for the household account. The other she passed to Evelyn, who tucked it into her purse without looking at me. "What's that?" I asked. She kissed my cheek. "Church, quiet, Sunday sweet." "Receipts," she said, and before I could ask more, Hal clapped his hands and said, "Lunch?" The envelopes rustled like dry leaves, and somewhere inside those thin paper walls, I swear I heard my name being folded out of the future. After the bank, things moved fast in a way that didn't feel like movement at all, more like being carried. Evelyn started talking about improvements, her voice bright as new paint. "If we put some of the money into the house, we'll raise our value," she said, spreading glossy brochures across the dining table. Kitchens like magazines, porches that seemed to float. Lucas traced the photos with a thumb and said, "Pretty," in that careful way teenagers speak when they think their opinions are rent-controlled. Becky rolled her eyes. "Can we just buy a second car so I don't have to share with Lucas?" She snapped. Evelyn's smile held. Mine didn't. I noticed other changes. Hal came by more, too often for a brother-in-law without an invitation. He and Evelyn huddled in the study with the door almost closed, their whispers like wind slipping through cracks. When I reached for the knob once, Evelyn's voice knifed out, "Later, Sam, please." I backed away, feeling like a stranger in socks on my own rug. That night, I tried again to talk about the scaffold, about the way a wrench had turned and a hand had let go, but Evelyn pressed a finger to my lips. "Let the lawyers do their jobs," she said softly. "Janet will take care of it." "We will take care of you," Janet Monroe called 2 days later, her voice steady, her questions specific. "I need to see the deposit slip," she said. "And I want to confirm the account is joint, your name and Evelyn's." I told her yes, I thought so, mostly so she'd stop hearing the doubt in my breathing. "Bring me copies," she insisted. "Do not send anything through anyone else." When I relayed that to Evelyn, she nodded too fast. "Of course," she said. "We'll go tomorrow." Tomorrow came, but not the appointment. Evelyn woke me with coffee and a kiss, and the suggestion of a drive into the hills. "You need air," she said. "We both do." And the Blue Ridge did what it always does, spread itself like a quilt, quieting my questions. We pulled off at a ridge, with a view that knocked me back into my bones. I needed to see this, I admitted, feeling small and human and easy to love. Evelyn slipped her arm through mine. "I know," she said. When we got home, the study door was locked. A set of blueprints sat on the desk underneath the glass, just visible through the shadow. A line drawing of a house I didn't recognize. At the top, in neat letters, a name I didn't expect. Evelyn Price, not Dalton Price. My stomach went cold. I reached for the knob again. Evelyn appeared behind me, keys in her hand, smile in place. "A surprise," she said. "For us." She tucked the keys into her pocket. And for the first time I heard a click inside her smile. The first I heard of Cedar Bluff Road was from Clara Jennings, our neighbor with a telescope and a talent for seeing what people hoped she wouldn't. I was on the porch, afternoon sun slanting through bare branches, when Clara waved a folded flyer like a flag. "Your Evelyn sure is ambitious," she said, then caught the confusion on my face. "You didn't know?" She handed me the page. A realty listing, ink-smudged, boasting a new build and Mountain Views owner, E. Price. My name wasn't there. Not even in the white space. My throat tightened. I took the flyer inside. The house felt like it tilted. Evelyn was at the counter, slicing apples with surgical precision. "What's this?" I asked, laying the paper between us. She glanced, then smiled, that same lake-still smile, and said, "A project, Samuel. Investment property. Something to secure our future." She slid me a plate. The apples gleamed like small, careful lies. "With whose money?" I asked, hearing the gravel in my voice. "Ours," she answered, tone crisp. "All of this is ours." I wanted to believe her. God help me, I did. But Janet called again that evening, voice sharpened by concern. "Sam, I went to the bank to confirm the deposit," she said. "The settlement was split into 2 instruments, a joint account and another account under a name that isn't yours. Do you know anything about that?" Heat crawled up my neck. "Evelyn said," I began, then stopped, feeling like a man catching himself mid-fall. "Sam," Janet said quietly, "come to my office." Bring anything you've signed in the last month. I hung up and went to the study. The door was locked again. Evelyn, I called. Open it. She appeared so quickly it felt choreographed. Not now, she said, stepping between me and the door. Why? I asked, the words simple and heavy. Her eyes cooled. Because you don't need to see the mess behind a gift, she said. Hal's shadow crossed the hallway behind her. Everything okay? He asked, voice smooth as bar soap. We're discussing a surprise, she replied without looking back. That night, when the house went quiet, I lay awake counting the beats of the heater, the drip of the kitchen faucet, the long pauses between the world breathing and me pretending to. Somewhere between midnight and morning, I understood a small, brutal thing. Sometimes people tell the truth in future tense because it's easier to rewrite the past. Evelyn kept saying we're going to, it'll be ours. Tomorrow was her alibi. At dawn I rose, slipped on my boots and drove to Cedar Bluff Road. The gravel spit under my tires. There it was, a foundation poured into the hill like a promise. Framing lumber reaching at the sky. A portable toilet in the weeds. And a sign staked into the mud, permits E-price. The wind smelled like sawdust and snow. I stood there staring at a house half born of my pain, and I heard the scaffold again, the wrench, the choice. A pickup truck rolled up, window down, a foreman I didn't know tipping his cap. Are you the inspector? He asked. No, I said, my mouth dry as chalk. I'm the man who's supposed to live here. His brow furrowed. Funny, he said. The lady said she's building it for herself. My phone rang in my pocket, Janet's name bright on the screen. I answered with eyes still on the house. Sam, she said, voice low, urgent. I found something in the recorder's office and you're not going to like it. The wind lifted a tarp. The frame creaked like a memory. Tell me, I said. Tell me now. And on that cold hill with my future hammered into someone else's name, Janet told me the first fact that broke the rest open. The morning Janet called. The light was grey and slow, the kind that makes you feel older before breakfast. I was sitting at the kitchen table, nursing coffee gone cold, staring at a crack in the linoleum that had grown like a secret. Evelyn was humming somewhere in the house, Moon River, soft, distant. I didn't know yet that everything was about to tilt again. Sam, Janet said, voice tight. I went to the courthouse. The property deed for the house on Cedar Bluff. It's in Evelyn's maiden name. There's no record of you attached, not even as a co-signer. My stomach hollowed. That can't be right, I whispered. And we filed everything together. No, you didn't, Janet replied. Someone filed it for you. There's a signature next to hers and it's yours, Sam. But it isn't yours. I stared at the wall where Evelyn had hung a framed photo of us from 20 years ago. My smile in that picture looked like another man's. Forged? I managed to ask. Yes, Janet said. Sloppy but effective. And Hal Price notarized it. Her name hit like a hammer in a church. My pulse roared in my ears. The front door creaked. Evelyn stepped into the kitchen wearing her robe, hair loose, holding 2 mugs. Who's that, sweetheart? She asked. I watched her mouth move, gentle and ordinary, while Janet's voice poured poison through the receiver. Sam, listen. I need you to find any documents you signed after your accident. Originals, not copies. Keep them safe, and don't confront her yet. Please don't. But the part of me that still believed in justice, nor pride, and was already standing. Evelyn smiled as she set the extra cup in front of me. Thought you'd want fresh coffee, she said. Her tone didn't waver, didn't even twitch. That scared me more than a confession would have. Janet says the house isn't in my name, I said, voice shaking. For a second, a blink. Something flickered in her eyes, then vanished. Of course it is, she said smoothly. She must have read the wrong file. But when she reached for her mug, her hand trembled just enough to make the spoon rattle. That afternoon, I waited until Evelyn left for her meeting with Hal. I watched her taillights disappear down the drive before limping to the study. The door was locked, as always. But I'd learned something in 30 years of fixing houses. Every lock has a weakness. I fetched a screwdriver, wedged it into the old brass latch, and twisted until the wood gave with a dry groan. The room smelled like cedar and cigarette smoke. Papers were stacked in neat towers on the desk, bound with rubber bands, tagged with sticky notes in Evelyn's careful script. And there, middle drawer, half hidden under receipts, was a folder marked Settlement Docs Original. I opened it. My name stared back from a dozen pages, looping and perfect, except it wasn't mine. My real signature leaned left. This one slanted right, as if written by someone who knew the shape of me but not the soul. Attached were bank slips, transfers, a withdrawal authorization stamped with Hal's notary seal. At the bottom, Evelyn's maiden name appeared again and again, clean and untouched. My hands shook so hard I had to sit. Beneath the folder lay another, blueprints for the Cedar Bluff house. The title block read, Owner E. Price, Private Residence. There was no trace of Samuel Dalton anywhere. I flipped through more papers. An insurance claim, a property appraisal, even a life insurance policy where Evelyn stood as sole beneficiary. The effective date? 2 weeks before my accident. The air went thin. My knees buckled and I caught myself on the desk. In the corner of the room, the wall safe blinked. A small green light. I'd never seen her use it. I entered our anniversary date out of instinct, and it clicked open. Inside was a bundle of checks, cash deposits, and a thick manila envelope labeled Confidential Hal P. I didn't open it then. I couldn't. Instead, I sat there, the silence pressing on my chest, realizing how easily love could forge a man's name and bury the truth under we. Evelyn came home just after sunset. The house glowed with the same warmth that had always felt like safety. I was sitting at the table, the folder open before me. She froze when she saw it. The mask slipped only for a second. Enough. What's this? I asked quietly. Where did you get that? She said, her voice suddenly sharp. Locked drawer, I said. Right where you left it. Her eyes darted to the hallway, to the front door, maybe calculating distance. You shouldn't go through my things, Sam, she said. My things, I repeated louder. These are our things. My money. My name. She sighed, actually sighed, and sat across from me like we were about to discuss the weather. You don't understand, she said softly. You weren't thinking clearly after the accident. You would have wasted it all. Given half away or lost it on some foolish business. I had to protect us. By erasing me? I asked. By saving us, she countered, eyes narrowing. I built that house for our future. You just weren't ready to see it. I slid the forged signature toward her. Did Hal help? She flinched. Hal helped with paperwork, she said carefully. He's family. He's a crook, I said. Her silence was louder than any denial. For a long moment the only sound was the wall clock. Slow, steady, unmerciful. Then Evelyn leaned back, folded her hands, and said something that chilled me more than any lie before it. You wouldn't have survived that fall without me, Sam. You owe me. I made sure you'd have something to your name, even if it wasn't this house. Her words landed like dirt on a coffin lid. I stood, my body shaking with pain and fury. You forged my life, I said. She tilted her head. No, she whispered. I corrected it. I walked out before I did something that would damn me worse than her lies. Outside, the night smelled of pine and frost. I could see the mountains in the distance, dark and indifferent. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Janet. Don't sleep there tonight. Meet me at my office in the morning. We'll start fixing this. Behind me, the porch light flicked on. Evelyn stood in the doorway, shadowed, silent. For a second, I thought she'd call after me. Instead, she whispered something to herself, too low to catch, and shut the door. The click of the latch echoed like a verdict. I didn't sleep that night. The cold crept in through the cracks of the window frame, and every sound in that house felt amplified. The pipes moaning, the heater kicking on, Evelyn's soft footsteps pacing the hallway. I sat at the edge of the bed, fully dressed, watching the dark fade into the faint blue of dawn. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not from pain, not from the lingering ache in my ribs, but from the weight of what I'd discovered. At 7 a.m. I left the house without a word. The frost on the windshield caught the sunrise, shards of orange fire glinting off the glass like it was mocking me. Asheville was just waking up. Dogs barking, shop lights flicking on, the smell of bread drifting from the bakery on Maple Street. Everything looked exactly the same, and I hated it for that. Janet Monroe's office sat above a florist shop, her name stenciled in gold on the glass door. She was already there, a cup of coffee in one hand, files spread across her desk like a war map. Sit, she said, not bothering with small talk. I've been digging all night. She slid a folder toward me. Inside were copies of the deeds, bank transfers, and one notarized affidavit with Harold Price's signature. He forged your authorization to transfer the settlement into an investment trust. Janet explained, her eyes hard. "It's all in Evelyn's maiden name. You were cut out of your own future before the check even cleared." My throat went dry. "Can we fix it?" She exhaled, long and heavy. "It's possible. But Hal's smart. He used shell accounts, straw ownerships. It'll take time, maybe years. Years." The word hit like a punch. Janet reached across the desk, her voice softening. "Sam, you need to understand, this wasn't just greed. It was planned. Someone wanted control long before that scaffold fell." I froze. I think you should stop assuming it was an accident," she said quietly. The room tilted. I saw again that moment, the hand loosening the wrench, the deliberate motion, the calm voice that had whispered, "Don't look up." I left her office with the folder under my arm and the truth burning in my chest. When I pulled into my driveway, Evelyn's car was gone. But smoke curled from the chimney, thick, black and wrong. I stepped inside and the smell hit first, paper and gasoline. The study door stood open. The desk drawers gaped like open mouths. The folders, the proof, it were gone. The safe door hung wide. Evelyn had burned everything. The house smelled like betrayal. Not just of love, but of time. Years of dinners, arguments, laughter, all turning to smoke. I stood in the doorway of the study, watching the last of the papers curl and blacken in the fireplace. My own name flaked into ash. Evelyn turned from the flames, face calm, cheeks flushed from heat. "It's done," she said simply. "We can move on now." "Move on?" My voice cracked. "You destroyed evidence of a crime." "I destroyed the poison that was killing us," she said, stepping closer. Her robe brushed against my arm. It smelled faintly of lavender. "You don't understand, Sam. You never did. That money was going to rot us. You were too soft, too trusting. I had to take care of it. You forged my name. You stole my life." She laughed once, sharp and small. "You call it theft. I call it survival." I looked at her then, really looked. The woman I'd married was gone, replaced by something colder, sharper. "How long have you been planning this?" Her eyes flicked away just for a second. "Long enough to know you wouldn't stop me." Something inside me snapped. I grabbed the poker from beside the hearth and shoved it into the fire, stirring the embers until sparks leapt out, bright and furious. "You planned everything," I said. "The accident too, didn't you?" Evelyn's breath caught. "Don't be ridiculous," but her eyes, they betrayed her. They widened just enough. "Hal was at the site that day," I said. "He had no reason to be there." "You don't know what you're saying." I stepped closer. "You told me to trust him, to let him handle everything. Did you tell him to loosen that bolt too?" Her lip trembled, but she stayed silent. The fire crackled between us, and for a moment I thought she'd lunge or confess, but she only whispered, "You wouldn't understand what desperation makes a person do." "Try me," I said. She turned away. "You should go, Sam." "Where?" "Anywhere but here." I looked around the house and at the photos on the wall, the dent in the sofa cushion where she used to read. All of it felt like props in a play I no longer believed in. I walked out. She didn't follow. Behind me, the fire hissed, eating the last of my signature. I spent that night at a roadside motel off I-40. The sheets smelled like bleach and cigarette ghosts, but it was quiet. And for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. The next morning, I drove straight to the police department. The sign out front read Buncombe County Sheriff's Office. Inside, the lights buzzed like old neon. Detective Alan Brooks met me in a small interview room that smelled faintly of coffee and paperwork. He was mid-40s, square-jawed, the kind of man who'd seen too much and still hoped to see something good. "Janet called ahead," he said, flipping open a notepad. "Said you've got concerns about forged documents and possible insurance fraud." "Fraud, theft, maybe attempted murder," I said, my voice low. His eyebrows rose. "That's a leap." I slid the remaining papers, the few I'd copied before Evelyn's bonfire, across the table. She burned the rest. He scanned the signatures, then whistled softly. "Not bad work, forgeries this clean." He looked up. "You sure your brother-in-law notarized these?" "Yes, Harold Price, Evelyn's brother." Brooks leaned back, pen tapping his teeth. "I know that name. He's been flagged before. Shady real estate deals, kickback schemes. It always slithers out." "Then stop letting him slither," I said. Brooks smiled faintly. "We'll see what we can do. I'll open a file. We'll need statements, maybe a warrant." "But Sam—" He hesitated. "This is going to get messy. She's still your wife." If she pushes back, she can bury you in countersuits. I don't care, I said. I just want the truth on record, he nodded. Then let's start. I told him everything, the accident, the signatures, the house, the fire. By the end, my voice was raw, and the tape recorder's red light blinked steady as a heartbeat. Brooks closed his notebook. We'll pull financials. See if we can trace the money trail. In the meantime, don't go near her. She's going to play innocent. Let her think she's safe. I nodded, though part of me ached to confront her one last time. As I left the station, the afternoon sun spilled over the Blue Ridge peaks, warm and indifferent. I thought about Evelyn in that house, her house, me standing before the ashes of everything we'd been. And I wondered if she felt even a flicker of what she'd done. The wind carried the smell of smoke again, faint and bitter. It followed me all the way home. It was late afternoon when the patrol car rolled up the gravel drive, the sound of its tires crunching against stones like slow applause. I'd been back at the motel for 3 days, living off black coffee and sandwiches from a gas station. The air smelled of rain and rust, and I was just starting to believe the silence might last, when it didn't. A knock rattled the door. I opened it to the sight of 2 deputies standing under the eaves, rain glistening on their hats. Between them stood Detective Alan Brooks, the same man who'd promised to see what we can do. His face was unreadable, a blend of regret and duty. "Mr. Dalton," he said, his voice level, "we need you to come with us." "For what?" I asked, though the answer already clawed at the edges of my gut. "Your wife filed a restraining order." "Claims you threatened her life," I laughed. The sound cracked, bitter. "She burned my papers, stole my money, and built a house in her name." "I confronted her, sure, but I never touched her." Brooks sighed. "I believe you. But the law moves on paperwork, not belief. We've got to process this. They didn't cuff me. Maybe because I didn't fight. Maybe because I looked too tired to be dangerous." The ride back to the station was quiet, except for the rain whispering against the windows. Outside, Asheville blurred. Grey rooftops, wet streets, church bells muffled by fog. At the station, they took my statement again. Brooks kept his eyes down most of the time. "You'll have a hearing in 2 weeks," he said. "In the meantime, stay clear of your wife and the Cedar Bluff property." When I stepped outside, my world was smaller. 1 motel room, 1 tarnished name, and no home left to go to. I sat on the curb under the streetlight, feeling the rain soak through my jacket. Across the road, a diner buzzed faintly with laughter and jukebox songs. For a second, I almost walked in, but then my phone rang. It was Lucas. "Dad," he said, his voice quiet and tense. "Mom told us everything." I felt my stomach turn cold. "Everything?" "She said you tried to hurt her. Said you were out of control." "That's a lie, son." A pause. Rain filled the silence between us. "I don't know who to believe anymore," he said, and hung up. 2 days later, Becky showed up at the motel. I didn't expect it. She'd always been Evelyn's shadow. But the knock at my door that morning carried a familiar rhythm. 3 soft taps. Just like when she was a kid afraid of storms. She stood there in the hallway, soaked to the skin, her blonde hair plastered to her face. "You look awful, Dad," she said. Her voice was brittle, trying to hide the tremor underneath. "I could say the same about you," I said softly, stepping aside. She hesitated before coming in. Her eyes scanned the small room, the coffee-stained table, the unmade bed, the half-empty suitcase, and I could see it hurt her to see me reduced to this. "I don't know why I came," she said finally. "Lucas thinks you've lost it. Mom says you're obsessed." "Obsessed with what?" "The truth?" She looked away. "She showed us the police report, Dad. Said you broke into the house, that you threatened her with a fire poker." I picked it up, yes, I admitted. Because I was standing in front of a fire, she started to burn every piece of my life. "She took everything, Becky. The house, the money, my name." Becky's eyes filled, but she blinked it away fast, just like Evelyn used to. "You should have left, Dad. You should have walked away before it got this bad." I did. And she found a way to drag me back. She sank into the chair by the window, chewing her lips, silent for a long time. "Lucas says she's scared," she whispered. "Says she's been locking the doors at night. That she cries. That's guilt, not fear." Becky flinched, then stood. "I can't do this," she said, voice breaking. "You both sound insane. I don't even know what's real anymore." She turned to leave. I reached out, not to grab her, just to make her stop, and she pulled away like my touch burned. "Don't, Dad," she said. "Just..." Don't. When the door closed, I sat in the silence she left behind. I stared at the spot her tears had darkened the carpet and wondered when love had turned into a courtroom where everyone testifies against you. That weekend, I drove out to Cedar Bluff Road anyway. Brooke's warning echoed in my head, but I didn't care. The mountains looked ghostly in the rain, and the new house stood there like a monument to betrayal. Pale wood, gleaming windows, fresh paint that smelled of money and sin. Through the glass, I could see Evelyn moving inside, a wineglass in one hand, phone in the other. Her laugh floated faintly through the rain, soft, practiced, the kind she used to give me when the world still made sense. A second figure passed behind her. Hal Price. He poured her more wine. She leaned in close. Too close. Something in me cracked clean through. I stepped closer to the window, my reflection blurring with the scene inside. A ghost staring at what used to be his life. I wanted to shout, to break the glass, to demand she look at me. But what would that change? I turned away, boots sinking into the wet clay. My car sat at the edge of the property, engine ticking softly. I was halfway down the hill when headlights flashed behind me. A sheriff's car. Brooks got out, rain dripping off his hat. "I told you not to come here," he said. "I just needed to see it," I murmured. He followed my gaze toward the house where Evelyn and Hal stood framed by the warm light. "She called 5 minutes ago," Brooks said. "Said you were trespassing. She's playing it by the book." "She always did," I whispered. Brooks sighed, his voice softening. "We'll find something, Sam, but you need to stop feeding her case." "I'm not feeding it," I said. "I'm living it." As he drove off, I looked back one last time. The house glowed gold against the grey sky. Beautiful, cruel, untouchable. And for the first time, I understood that justice moves slower than love dies. A month after the restraining order, the mailbox stopped meaning anything. The letters had come first from Janet Monroe, then from the insurance company, then from people I thought still remembered who I was. But by late spring, all that arrived were bills and silence. The motel clerk, Dennis, stopped asking how long I'd be staying. He just handed me the key with that small-town pity that's worse than contempt. The walls smelled of bleach and old air conditioning, and the hum at night became the soundtrack of my punishment. I tried calling Lucas once more. The line rang until his voicemail answered, cheerful and distant. "This is Lucas, leave a message." I did. Told him I missed him. Told him I still had his baseball glove in the truck. Told him his mother was lying. When I hung up, I knew he'd never listen. I called Becky next, straight to voicemail. I didn't leave one this time. The loneliness came in quiet waves, and not loud, not dramatic. Just the slow understanding that no one was on their way. Janet still fought, sending updates through thin envelopes with careful handwriting. "The DA is reviewing the forgery evidence. Hal's business license is under audit. Be patient. Be patient." 2 words people say when they're not the ones drowning. One night I drove to the overlook above town. The air was heavy with honeysuckle and summer rain. Below me, the lights of Asheville flickered, beautiful, indifferent. I thought about calling Evelyn, not to scream or beg, but to ask her why. What emptiness in her chest could have needed so much destruction to fill it? But I didn't call. I knew what she'd say. She'd tell me I should thank her. She'd say I still had my life, and she'd be right, though it didn't feel like much of one. A week later, Janet called with a tremor in her voice. "Sam," she said, "do you need to sit down?" I was already sitting, staring at the wall, coffee cooling on the table. "They moved fast," she continued. "Evelyn filed for divorce. But that's not all. She also petitioned to change your legal ownership on every account. She's using a claim of mental incompetence from the time of your accident." My head spun. "What does that mean?" "It means, according to her, you weren't capable of handling your affairs when you signed those papers. She's arguing that everything you owned, including your house, your car, even your pension, fell under her management by default. She's erasing you, Sam." The words landed like stones. "Can she do that?" "She can try," Janet said quietly. "And she's good at it. Her brother's pulling strings. She's got affidavits from neighbors, doctors, even your kids. She's built a case where you're a confused, unstable man, a danger to yourself." For a long time I couldn't speak. When I finally did, my voice came out small. "She's rewriting history." "Yes," Janet said. "And people are starting to believe it. That afternoon I drove into town to refill a prescription. The pharmacist, Marla, a woman who'd known me for 20 years, smiled politely, but hesitated before handing me the bag. "Oh, Mr. Dalton," she said, lowering her voice. "I thought you moved away. Evelyn told us you were getting help somewhere." I looked at her, met her pity, at her small-town certainty, and something inside me cracked. When I got back to the motel, the receipt from the pharmacy read, "Name on account, E. Dalton, not Samuel." Evelyn had even taken that. By fall, my settlement was gone, my credit frozen, my accounts empty. The motel stopped letting me pay weekly. Dennis gave me 2 days to move out. I packed everything I owned into the bed of my old Ford, 2 duffel bags, a toolbox, and a folder of fading photocopies that proved I once existed. I drove aimlessly for hours, through Hendersonville, down to Greenville, back along the mountain roads where Evelyn and I used to picnic when life still tasted like possibility. Every mile felt like driving through the ruins of my own past. That night I slept in the truck by the side of the road. The forest whispered through cracked windows, and somewhere far off an owl called. I lay there thinking of Evelyn's face the day we married, the way she laughed when the minister said, "For better or worse." I should have asked how bad worse could get. The next morning, I stopped at a diner just outside Brevard. The waitress poured me coffee without asking and said, "You're Sam Dalton, right? Weren't you married to that Price woman who built that big house up the mountain?" I nodded slowly. "She said you took off," the waitress said, shaking her head. "Said she tried everything to help you. Some people just can't be saved, I guess." I stared at the steam rising from the cup. "Guess not," I murmured. When she walked away, I took out my wallet and stared at the license. The plastic had started to peel, my photo fading like an old ghost. For a second, I considered tossing it, but no, if Evelyn wanted me erased, I'd make sure I left at least one trace behind. I took a napkin from the counter, wrote in shaky pen, "My name is Samuel Dalton. I existed, I loved, I was betrayed." I folded it, slipped it inside the license sleeve, and put it back in my pocket. That night, I drove on. Somewhere behind me, on a hill that once was mine, a house glowed against the dark, a monument built from my bones. And though no one said my name anymore, I whispered it to the wind, just to remind the world it still belonged to me. Time doesn't pass in years when you're forgotten. It passes in faces that stop recognizing you. I left North Carolina the winter after Evelyn's final victory in court. I didn't watch the hearing. Janet had begged me to stay away. She said Evelyn had brought Lucas and Becky to testify that I was unstable, that I'd lost track of reality. And when the judge declared that everything, the house, the settlement, even the insurance from my accident, legally belonged to Mrs. Evelyn Price, I didn't even have the strength to be surprised. I crossed state lines with nothing but a toolbox and a pair of work gloves. I took day labor jobs, roofing in Tennessee, drywall in Georgia, roadwork in Alabama. Nobody asked about my past, and I learned to stop offering it. I told people my wife died years ago, and they'd nod with the soft sympathy strangers keep for old ghosts. The years became a rhythm. Wake before sunrise. Work until my hands went numb. Sleep wherever the air was quietest. I grew older in slow motion. The lines on my face deepened, like the rings inside an old tree, each one marking a year I'd rather forget. Sometimes, when the night stretched long and the roads hummed empty, I'd imagine the house on Cedar Bluff Road, the walls painted, the garden grown wild. I'd picture Evelyn in some perfect dress, laughing with Hal on the porch, the two of them living inside the lie that buried me. I stopped writing to Becky and Lucas after the 5th year. None of the letters were ever answered. I didn't even know if Evelyn let them read them, or if she told them I was dead. Maybe that was easier. By the time I hit 60, I lived out of a camper parked behind a gas station outside Montgomery. My hair had gone gray, my hands shook, and my back screamed each morning. But the one thing that refused to die was memory, and guilt. Guilt that I'd let her win so completely. It was a Tuesday, hot, dusty, the kind of southern heat that glues your shirt to your spine. I was eating cold beans from a can when Martha Fields, the nurse from years ago, found me. She still worked with a volunteer medical van that made monthly rounds at truck stops. "Samuel Dalton," she said, squinting against the sun. "Well, I'll be." "I thought you were dead." "Not yet," I said with a tired grin. She laughed, then grew quiet. "You don't look half as bad as the rumors said." "What rumors?" I asked. She hesitated. I heard from a friend in Asheville. Evelyn's not doing so well. Her health's failing. Cancer, they think. The words didn't bring the satisfaction I expected. Just a hollow echo. People like her don't die, I muttered. They just change addresses. Martha reached into her satchel and pulled out an envelope, yellowed and creased. This came to the clinic a month ago. No return address, but it had your name, full name. I kept it in case I ever found you. My hands trembled as I took it. The handwriting was shaky, familiar. Inside was a single sheet, the paper lined and thin. The first words hit like thunder. Dad, I don't know if this will reach you, but I need to try. Mom's sick. Real sick. She talks about you every night now. I think she wants to tell you something. Lucas won't hear it, but I can't watch her die with that look in her eyes. Please come home. Becky, I read it twice, 3 times. My heart pounded so hard my vision blurred. Martha touched my shoulder. You okay? I nodded, though my throat had closed. No, I said. But maybe it's time to be. For the first time in 20 years, I pointed the truck north. Driving through the Blue Ridge again felt like slipping into a dream I'd outlived. The trees looked smaller somehow, or maybe I'd just grown tired. Every curve in the highway carried an echo. The smell of sawdust from that old construction site, the clang of metal, the scream of falling scaffolding that never stopped ringing in my head. When I crossed into Asheville, nothing looked the same. New stores, new houses, new people who didn't know my name. But the mountains were unchanged, patient, ancient, waiting. I stopped first at a small diner on the edge of town. The waitress was young, smiling. Haven't seen you before, she said. Passing through? Coming back, I answered. She laughed softly. Most folks don't. When I reached Cedar Bluff Road, dusk had already fallen. The air smelled of pine and wet soil. The house stood exactly as I remembered it, larger now, freshly painted. A porch light glowing like an eye that never closes. I parked by the curb, engine off. My reflection glimmered in the windows. Inside, I could see the faint flicker of a television and the outline of a frail woman in a wheelchair, Evelyn. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe. So much rage, so much grief, all of it tangled with something smaller and crueler, the faint, stubborn ache of love. I didn't knock that night. I couldn't. I drove to a cheap motel at the edge of town, lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling fan turning slow circles above me. Becky's letter sat open on the nightstand. Her handwriting looked young again, hopeful. In the dark, I whispered her name. Then Evelyn's, both tasted the same, old, bitter, unfinished. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'd knock on that door. Tomorrow, I'd face the ghost who had worn my wife's skin. Tomorrow. Morning came slow, like the light was afraid to touch me. I hadn't slept. I just watched the window fade from black to gray. Becky's letter folded beside me like a heartbeat I could still hear. At 9 a.m., I finally drove back to Cedar Bluff Road. The gravel crackled beneath the tires as I pulled up in front of the house that had stolen my name. From the porch, the air smelled of rain-soaked cedar and wildflowers. It should have smelled like home. Instead, it smelled like a grave. When the door opened, it wasn't Evelyn who greeted me. It was Becky. For a second, she just stared. Her eyes filled before her lips even parted. Dad, she whispered. My voice failed me. I wanted to hold her, to apologize, to ask 1,000 questions. But before I could, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me, and I felt her shoulders shaking. She's inside, she said finally. She doesn't have long. Inside, the air was heavy with antiseptic and wilted flowers. Machines hummed faintly. On the far side of the room, under a quilt she probably didn't make, Evelyn sat slumped in her chair. She was barely recognizable, her hair gone thin and grey, her face pale, her hands trembling as they gripped the armrests. But her eyes, they were still sharp. You came, she said, her voice rough as gravel. I stood there, unsure if I should curse or pray. You wrote? She shook her head weakly. Becky did. I told her not to. Then why am I here? I asked. Evelyn's lips curved into something like a smile, small, sad, almost human. Because the truth's finally heavier than the lie. Before I could answer, the front door creaked again. Clara Jennings, the old neighbor from years ago, stepped in holding a box covered in dust. I think it's time he saw this, Clara said softly. I found it in my attic. Evelyn's head dropped. You should have burned it. Clara set the box on the table between us. You left it behind when you moved. I thought it was holiday stuff until I opened it. I looked at Evelyn, then at the box. What's in there? Her voice cracked. Everything you weren't supposed to find. The box was lighter than it looked, cardboard soft with years of dust. Inside were stacks of folders, brittle envelopes, and a metal cassette tape labeled Day of Incident, Sight Camera 3. My hands trembled as I lifted it out. Clara crossed her arms. When the new owners cleaned out your old garage, some of the site recordings got tossed in a junk pile. I picked up this box thinking it was Christmas lights. I glanced at Evelyn. Her breathing had quickened. Don't, she said. Please, but I opened the first folder. Inside were photographs from the construction site, close-ups of scaffolding joints, inspection notes, and signatures. And there, on one of the safety reports, was a red circle drawn around a name, Harold Price. Evelyn groaned softly, pressing her hand to her chest. He wasn't supposed to... Wasn't supposed to what? I asked, voice low. Her eyes met mine, wet and burning. It wasn't supposed to kill you. Just to delay the project. He loosened the bolt so the site would fail inspection. He said it'd only scare the company into renegotiating your settlement. But you... She stopped, swallowing hard. You weren't supposed to be up there that morning. The room tilted. The words echoed, loud and cruel. Clara's voice trembled. My God, Evelyn. Evelyn stared past me, into some memory only she could see. Hal said he'd fix it. He promised no one would get hurt. Then when you fell, everything changed. He made me hide the reports, told me we could make it right if we controlled the money. And for a while I believed him. I wanted to scream, to break something, to ask her how she could have stood by me in that hospital bed, holding my hand, whispering I love you, knowing what she'd done. Instead, I picked up the tape. We can prove it now, I said. Clara nodded toward the old VCR by the TV. It still works. I slid the tape in. The image flickered to life, grainy, washed-out footage of the construction site, and then there it was. The scaffold. The morning light. And a man in a cap, Hal still crouched near the base, wrench in hand. Evelyn closed her eyes. Turn it off. But I didn't. I watched him twist the bolt loose, check over his shoulder, then walk away. And 30 seconds later, I watched myself fall. When the tape ended, the silence was thick enough to drown in. Only the hum of the oxygen machine filled the room. Evelyn sat very still, her eyes fixed on the dark TV screen as if it might offer forgiveness. Clara touched my arm gently. Sam, I can take this to the sheriff, she whispered, but Evelyn shook her head. No, she rasped. Let me. I turned toward her. You? Her lips trembled. I already called Detective Brooks last week. I told him everything. He's the one who told Becky to reach you. He said it was time. Why now? I asked, the words tasting like rust. Because I'm dying, she said simply. And because Hal isn't. Becky covered her mouth, tears running down her cheeks. Mom. Evelyn looked at her, then back at me. He took the money. He left me with guilt in a house I can't stand to look at. I thought building it would make the noise stop. But it never did. She reached for my hand. Her skin was cold, paper thin. I wanted to tell you years ago, she whispered. But every day I didn't became another reason I couldn't. For a long time I just sat there, her hand in mine, the weight of 2 decades pressing down on my chest. Finally I said, You destroyed me. Evelyn? She nodded, tears spilling freely. I know. And you'll die free, I said. Her eyes flickered toward the box, the tape still spinning in the machine. Not free, she murmured. Just finished. That night Detective Brooks came. He took the tape, the documents, Clara's statement. When he left, he squeezed my shoulder. This changes everything, he said quietly. Hal's done for. After they all left, I sat beside Evelyn's bed. The house was silent except for her shallow breathing. Do you hate me? She asked. I didn't answer. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows like it wanted in. I hadn't set foot inside a courthouse in over 20 years, not since the day I watched my own name get signed out of existence. This time, though, the air felt different, thicker, heavier, charged with something I couldn't name. Detective Brooks met me on the steps. His suit was the same gray as the sky. They moved fast, he said, guiding me through the metal detectors. The footage from the site, Evelyn's statement, the bank records, Hal's cooked. I nodded, though my stomach twisted. She's too sick to testify? Brooks hesitated. She'll appear by video from the hospice. It's not good, Sam, but she wants to do it. Inside, the courtroom smelled of paper, coffee, and years of other people's sins. Janet Monroe sat at the plaintiff's table, her once bright hair now streaked with gray. When she saw me, she smiled, not with triumph but with quiet relief. "We made it," she whispered. Across the aisle sat Harold Price, thinner than I remembered but still smug, still slicked back and pressed like he believed ironed shirts could hide rot. His lawyer leaned close, whispering fast. Hal looked over at me and smirked, tapping 2 fingers against his tie like a man checking his pulse. Judge Robert Cleary, the same man who had approved the original settlement decades ago, presided again. Maybe that was fate, maybe irony. Either way, his face looked older, carved deeper by time and guilt. "Case of state versus Harold Price," the clerk announced. "Charges include fraud, forgery, perjury, and criminal conspiracy." The words rolled through the room like thunder. Brooks leaned in. "We've got him, Sam, but it won't erase everything." "I'm not here to erase," I said quietly. "I'm here to remember. When the first piece of evidence played, that grainy tape from the construction site, no one breathed." The screen flickered, the scaffold shimmered, and then Hal appeared, crouched with his wrench, calm and methodical. Then came the fall. My fall. The sound of it echoed in my bones like it was happening all over again. Hal's lawyer tried to object. "That footage proves nothing about intent." "Sit down," the judge snapped. "We can see intent just fine." And for the first time in my life, the room didn't look away. The next morning, Evelyn's face appeared on the courtroom screen. The hospice room behind her was dim, curtains drawn. She looked impossibly small beneath the blankets, her skin translucent, but her eyes were steady. The clerk swore her in. Her voice came through the speakers, fragile but clear. "My name is Evelyn Price Dalton." Janet stood. "Mrs. Dalton, did your brother Harold Price intentionally cause the scaffold collapse that injured your husband, Samuel Dalton?" Evelyn's lips trembled, but she met the camera. "Yes," a murmur rippled through the room. Hal shifted, his jaw tightening. "Did you aid in covering up that act?" Janet asked softly. "Yes, why?" Evelyn closed her eyes. "Because I thought money could fix guilt. Because I believed love would survive a lie. Because I was weak." Hal shot to his feet. "She's delirious. She's dying." "Sit down, Mr. Price," the judge warned. Evelyn's gaze found me through the lens. "I wanted to say I'm sorry, Sam, but sorry doesn't buy back years." Her breath caught and the nurse beside her adjusted the oxygen line. "All I can give you now is the truth." Her last words came out like a prayer. "He made me watch you fall, and I did nothing." The screen went black. In the silence that followed, even Hal's lawyer didn't speak. Brooks leaned close to me. "She died 10 minutes after recording that statement," he whispered. "They sent it to me right before court." I felt my chest cave in. The anger that had lived in me for decades didn't burn anymore. It just stopped. When the judge called a recess, I stepped outside into the corridor, away from the whispers and the headlines. Through the tall windows, I could see the courthouse lawn, the same patch of grass I'd stood on 20 years ago when my life was taken apart. Back then, the air had smelled of victory for her. Now it just smelled like rain. 2 days later, the jury came back. 10 women, 2 men, all middle-aged, faces drawn with the fatigue of truth. "On all counts," the forewoman said, voice steady, "we find the defendant, Harold Price, guilty." Hal's smirk vanished. His lawyer froze mid-blink. The gavel struck once, clean and final. The sound should have felt like redemption. But it didn't. It felt like an echo from a life I no longer owned. Brooks clapped my shoulder. "For you did it," he said. "No," I answered. "The truth did." Janet smiled through tears. "You're a free man again, Sam. Free." The word meant something different now. It didn't sound like laughter. It sounded like loss. Outside, the press waited. Microphones, cameras, headlines that would vanish by next week. I didn't stop. I just walked past them, into the drizzle that had started to fall. As I reached my truck, Becky ran up, breathless. "Dad!" I turned, and for the first time in years, she looked at me without confusion. "I saw her video," she said. "She told the truth." I nodded, unable to speak. "She said she left something for you," Becky added, pulling a small envelope from her coat. "In the house. She wanted you to have it." I took it, the paper soft from her hands. "Come with me?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. The drive up Cedar Bluff Road was silent. The house waited at the top like a monument finally ready to confess. Inside, the air was still, the faint smell of flowers and morphine lingering in the walls. In the master bedroom, on the nightstand beside her empty glass, sat a single key tied with a ribbon. A note beneath it read, "For Sam. The house is yours again. I was always just borrowing it." I stared at it for a long time, the edges of the paper trembling in my hand. Becky touched my shoulder. "What will you do now?" she asked. I looked around the room at the life that had once devoured mine. "Live," I said. But not here. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. The verdict had been spoken, the truth unearthed. But freedom, I realized, doesn't rebuild what time has already burned. The morning after the verdict, I stood alone in front of the house on Cedar Bluff Road. The same house that had swallowed my name. The one that Evelyn had built with the bones of my settlement. The rain from the night before had stopped, but the air still smelled of wet earth and pine. The porch creaked when I stepped onto it, the sound soft and tired, like the house knew who I was and wasn't sure it wanted to remember. My hand hesitated over the doorknob, then turned it. The key Evelyn left fit perfectly. Inside, everything was spotless, too spotless. Her furniture still stood exactly where it had always been in the photos Becky once sent me. The oak dining table polished to glass, the quilt on the couch folded into perfect corners, family pictures arranged with museum precision, but none of the smiles in those frames belonged to the world I remembered. I walked slowly through the rooms. My boots echoed on hardwood that Evelyn had once said she'd chosen for us. Every object seemed to whisper something old, something twisted. The smell of her perfume on a scarf draped over a chair, the hum of the fridge that I had once installed myself before my accident, the faint outline of a handprint on the wall where we used to lean and argue about nothing that mattered. I stopped by the fireplace, the same hearth where she had burned my papers all those years ago. The stone was clean now, the soot long gone, but I could still see it, the flames licking at the corners of my name. The smell of ink and betrayal. I touched the mantel. "You built your heaven out of my hell," I whispered. A sound startled me, soft footsteps from upstairs. My chest tightened. "Becky." I called. No answer. I climbed the staircase slowly, every board groaning under my weight. At the top of the landing, a draft stirred the curtains and a photograph on the hallway wall caught my eye. Evelyn, young again, smiling. Behind her, faint, almost invisible, a reflection in the mirror. Me, holding the camera. I stood there for a long time, staring at the ghost of the man I used to be. In the bedroom, the one that had once been ours, the air was cold and dry. The bed was stripped, the closet empty. But the window was open slightly, and the curtain fluttered like it was trying to speak. I closed it and noticed something, a loose board near the corner of the room. My knee cracked as I knelt down and pried it up with a screwdriver from my pocket. Beneath it was a small tin box wrapped in a faded ribbon. Inside there were letters, dozens of them folded tight and yellow with time. The first one was dated 1999, the year I disappeared from their lives. The handwriting was Evelyn's. "Sam, I saw you at the gas station today. You didn't see me. I almost called your name, but I couldn't. Hal says it's better if you move on, but I can't stop thinking about the way you looked at me before you fell." I tell myself it was shock, not recognition. But I don't believe myself. Another letter from years later. I tried to send Becky to college with your name on the application. They wouldn't let me. "The system doesn't remember you exist anymore. I've made sure of it. And now I don't know how to undo what I've done." Each letter was like a confession whispered into the dark. Apologies she'd written but never sent. Pleas to ghosts. The last letter was newer, its ink still bold. "If you ever come back, look under the window floorboard. You deserve to know I kept everything that mattered. Your birth certificate, your ID, your father's watch. I couldn't live in this house without keeping a piece of you buried inside it." I reached deeper into the box and found them. My old wallet, my driver's license, even a photograph of Lucas and Becky when they were small. Smiling at a 4th of July picnic. For the first time in 2 decades, I felt real tears on my face. Not the angry kind. The quiet kind that come when you realize forgiveness doesn't always come from others. Sometimes it starts when you forgive the version of yourself who trusted too much. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the house breathe around me. Its walls heavy with memories. Night came fast over the mountains. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat in the living room, listening to the crickets outside and the creak of old beams shifting above me. The house felt alive, like it was waiting for something. Around midnight I heard the faintest sound from the rocking chair upstairs. It swayed once, twice, the floorboards sighing beneath it. I froze. For a moment I thought it was the wind, but then it came again, steady, rhythmic. I climbed the stairs, heart thudding. The bedroom door stood open, the moonlight spilling in across the floor. The rocking chair moved gently, though no one sat in it. On the nightstand, a candle I hadn't lit before burned low, the wax pooling at its base. I walked closer. The air smelled faintly of Evelyn's perfume, lavender and smoke. "Evelyn," I said softly, "if you're here, what do you want?" The chair slowed, then stopped. In the quiet I heard it, a whisper, not from the air but from somewhere deep inside me. "Let it go." I closed my eyes. And for the first time in years I did. When I opened them, the chair was still. The candle had gone out, and the house, that house of ghosts, of lies, of love, finally felt empty. I left before sunrise. As I stepped off the porch, the wind carried the faint scent of rain again. The key weighed heavy in my palm. I placed it on the railing, looked once more at the windows and whispered, "Rest." Then I walked down the hill, the first light of morning touching the roof behind me. The past at last, stayed inside. The road away from Cedar Bluff twisted like a scar through the trees. The house disappeared in the rearview mirror, long before the ache in my chest did. I drove until the dawn caught up, that thin gray light that makes the world look honest even when it hurts. At a gas station outside Asheville, I stopped for coffee. The young clerk looked at my old ID and squinted. "Says this expired in 2005, he said. "I did too," I told him, and we both half smiled at the joke that wasn't a joke. I sat on the curb with the coffee warming my hands. Around me, life carried on. Cars humming down the highway. A boy chasing his dog across the lot, a woman laughing into her phone. Normal things. Things that used to belong to me. I thought about Evelyn's whisper in that empty house. Let it go. Maybe it wasn't her ghost. Maybe it was just my own voice. Finally catching up after all these years. I'd spent so long chasing justice, truth, closure. Words that sound clean, but feel like rust when you hold them too long. Now that I had them, all I wanted was silence. Before leaving town, I stopped by Janet Monroe's office. She was older, grayer, her desk piled with new battles. "You did it, Sam," she said, handing me a folder. "The court finalized the restitution order. The house and remaining assets are legally yours again." I looked at the papers without touching them. "What's left?" She shrugged gently. "Enough. Not what was taken, Ma, but something." I smiled, tired. "Then let it stay hers. The house, the land, everything. She built her cage. I don't need to move in." Janet studied me for a moment, then nodded. "You're free to go wherever you want. Free." I walked out into the sunlight, and for the first time since the scaffold snapped beneath me, I didn't look back. Weeks passed on the road. I stayed in small motels, ate at diners where no one knew my story, and watched the leaves turn gold over Tennessee hills. Freedom felt strange, light, slippery, almost dangerous. Then one morning my phone buzzed with a message from Becky. "Lucas wants to see you. He's ready now." It took me hours to reply, but I finally texted back, "Tell me where." We met at a park near the river, the same one where I used to take them fishing when they were little. Lucas stood by the bench, older, broader in the shoulders, but still with that same quiet kindness I remembered. Becky stood beside him, arms folded, as if holding herself together. "Hey, Dad," Lucas said softly. "Hey, son." For a moment, no one spoke. The river moved slow, the air thick with everything we'd lost. "I saw the news," Lucas said finally. "About Uncle Hal, about Mom." His voice faltered. "I didn't know." "I swear I didn't." "I know," I said. "You believed what you were told." "So did I." Becky wiped her eyes. "She asked us not to come to the trial," she whispered. "Said it would confuse us." I hate that I listened. I reached out, resting my hand over hers. "You were kids. It wasn't your fault." Lucas looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the boy who used to hand me tools while I worked under the truck, the one who once said he wanted to build houses like his old man. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said. I smiled, though my throat burned. "Don't be. Just live better than we did." We sat together until the sun dipped behind the trees. No grand speeches, no perfect endings. Just silence and the good kind this time. Before leaving, Becky hugged me. "Where will you go?" she asked. "Anywhere that isn't here," I said. "Maybe I'll finally build a porch that faces west." She smiled through tears. "Send a picture when you do." "I will," I lied. "Now I live in a small town in Kentucky near the edge of nowhere. I rent a modest cabin with a porch that looks out over a quiet field. Most evenings I sit outside with a cup of coffee and watch the sun bleed orange into the horizon. There's an old rocking chair next to mine. Empty, always empty. I keep it there on purpose. Some nights when the wind moves just right, it sways a little, and I let myself believe someone's there. Maybe Evelyn. Maybe the man I used to be. I still dream about the fall sometimes. The sound of the scaffold breaking, the world tilting, the sky rushing in too fast. But now when I wake, I don't feel the panic. Just a dull ache, the kind that reminds you you're still alive. The house on Cedar Bluff Road belongs to someone else now. The locals say it's haunted. They hear footsteps, voices, the smell of lavender in the halls. Maybe that's true. Or maybe that's just guilt settling into the walls the way smoke clings to curtains. When I look back on it all, the trial, the lies, the years lost, I realize something cruel but honest. Freedom doesn't mean peace. It just means no one's holding you anymore. I write sometimes, mostly letters I never send. One of them ends the same way every time. "I forgive you, Evelyn, but I can't miss what you took. The years are gone, the man's gone. What's left is just quiet, and maybe that's enough." The wind moves. The chair creaks once, twice, and I whisper to the air, "We're even now." Then I close my eyes, let the world fade to the sound of crickets and nightfall, and breathe. Because at last, there's nothing left to lose. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.